The palace drums went silent mid-beat. In the center of the courtyard, under a sky bright with kites and red umbrellas, the poor palm wine tapper walked forward in white wrappers and coral beads. Two guards banged their staffs on the stones and knelt. Chiefs bowed. The old king placed a bronze bracelet on the young man's wrist and announced in a voice that trembled through the crowd, "Udo will not be without a son. Behold Crown Prince Kene." Aaliyah Carter, pretty city girl with lace scarf on her hair and dust on her sandals, dropped the gourd she was holding. Palm wine spilled on the stones and ran toward her toes. She stared at the man she knew as Kene, the quiet climber of trees, the one who smelled of raffia and rain. He did not look at her. He looked past her, at the crowns, at duty, at a life he had hidden like a secret in the hollow of a tall palm. Someone whispered, "The tapper? A prince?" Aaliyah's chest burned. She had come to the village for 2 weeks to help her Auntie Joy recover from surgery, to breathe a little, to stay off social media and away from the noise of Milwaukee. She had stumbled into the market that first day and met a man with rope-burned hands, a calm smile and eyes like river stones. She had not known his real name. She had not known his real life. Now the king raised a palm frond. "Kene, my son, kneel." Kene knelt. A hush spread, the kind of hush that makes birds freeze mid-flight. The king touched the crown to Kene's head, and a flash of sunlight ran along the beads like fire. The crowd shouted, "Ease, ease. King, king," and the palace singers broke into praise. Then the old king turned to the people and said, "You all have seen his months of humility, his walking among you, his choosing work over pride. Today, as is custom, he will point out the woman whose heart proved true when she had no reason to pretend." Heads turned. Aaliyah stopped breathing. Kene rose slowly, lifted his hand and pointed, past her. The drums crashed. The king smiled. The woman Kene pointed at stepped forward, a tall lady in gold and white, chin lifted. Aaliyah's gourd rolled, hit a stone and cracked. All eyes swung toward her when she whispered, "But Kene?" The syllables left her mouth before she could swallow them back. Kene finally looked at her, and something like apology softened his face. Before a word could pass between them, the palace gates groaned open and a convoy of SUVs growled into the courtyard. A woman in sunglasses stepped out, carrying a glossy folder. "Your Highness," she called, voice clean like glass. "I'm here about the engagement agreement." The courtyard gasped. The king's hand froze in the air. Kene's jaw tightened. Aaliyah felt the ground tilt under her feet. The drum master lifted a stick but did not strike. The birds that had started to sing went silent again. The sunglasses woman opened the folder to a page stamped with a lawyer's seal. "It says," she added, "that the prince is already promised." The king lowered his palm frond, and the whole courtyard leaned forward as if the earth itself were listening. 2 weeks earlier, the first thing Aaliyah noticed in Udo village was the quiet. No sirens. No subway rumble. Just goats bleating, women laughing at the well, and the wind whispering through palm leaves like an old aunt giving advice. Auntie Joy's house sat at the end of a sandy path lined with hibiscus. The morning air smelled like smoke and fried plantain. When Aaliyah stepped from the bus, the sun touched her face like a warm hand. "You will like it," Auntie Joy said, hugging her with one arm. The other arm was bandaged from her surgery. "It is not America, but it is peace." That first market day, the whole world seemed to move in circles. Baskets passing from hand to hand, children chasing hoops, women spinning stories as they sold peppers. A man stood by a pile of raffia ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. He wore a faded blue shirt and carried a hooked knife. His hands were thick with calluses. He was bargaining with an old woman who refused to budge on price, and he was losing. "Come now, Mama Chi," he said, smiling. "Leave something for me." "Leave something for you?" she fired back. "You will climb my tree and drink my palm wine before the spirits do. That is something." Aaliyah laughed despite herself. The man heard and turned. His eyes held hers for a simple moment that felt like a long, clear drink of water. "Afternoon," he said, a little shy. "You are new here." "My aunt lives near the mango grove," she answered. "I'm Aaliyah. Here to help out." "Good. We need help here." "I'm Kene." He lifted the rope coils. "We need more hands to hold the tails of stubborn ropes like these." She raised an eyebrow. "You fight ropes?" "Every day. And trees. Sometimes they both win." A child tugged at Kene's shirt. "Uncle Kene, the sap is dripping too fast." "Ah, see." He tipped his head toward Aaliyah with a half-secret smile, as if letting her in on a joke, then jogged away, rope over his shoulder, knife glinting in the sun. That afternoon Aaliyah found Auntie Joy sitting with the neighbor women. "Who is Kene?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "A palm wine tapper from the ODU family," Auntie Joy said. "Keeps to himself. Helps people. He is not the type to talk big." "Is he married?" The women's eyes danced. "You have been here one day," Auntie Joy laughed. "Drink water first." Aaliyah told herself it was curiosity. Then she told herself it was nothing. But the next morning she walked down the path at sunrise to see the palms blush gold. From the corner of her eye she caught movement high in the trees. Kene was up there, strapped with rope, barefoot, moving like he belonged to the sky. The way he climbed made her stomach flip. He tapped the tree gently with the hollowed gourd, murmuring something, maybe thanks, maybe a prayer. The sap dripped, sweet and steady. He slid down and landed softly. "You're early," he said. "I couldn't sleep. The birds wouldn't let me. They think they own the morning." "Do you?" she asked. He thought about it. "I just borrow it." They walked to the next tree. The dew wet Aaliyah's ankles and the path smelled like new leaves. Kene showed her how to tie the rope in a figure-8 knot. He spoke slowly, letting silence sit between words so she could fit her thoughts there. Aaliyah told him about her city life. Late buses, late-night diners, the small salon where she braided hair after classes, the feeling of always moving but not always arriving. He listened in a way that made her feel seen, not as a guest, but as a person who could belong. When she reached for a gourd on the ground, her phone buzzed with a message from her ex, Malik. He had a habit of writing when she was almost happy. She turned the phone face down and felt the sun climb her shoulders. Day by day Aaliyah learned the village rhythm. Wash bowls at the stream, help Auntie Joy with yams, trade jokes with the old men who carved masks under the almond trees. Day by day she learned Kene's rhythm too. The way he greeted elders, the way he gave the best of the morning sap to the old widow whose son had left, the way he fixed a child's broken slingshot with a smile serious enough to make the boy stand taller. The village began to prepare for the new yam festival. Drums practicing at dusk, girls weaving flowers into their hair, boys painting masks with careful pride. A rumor ran through the gossip like a fish through water, quick, slippery. They said the king was sick. They said the king's only son had disappeared to the city. They said the council watched the youths, measuring character the way grandmothers measure salt. With sense, not with spoons. Aaliyah paid little attention. She was learning how to carry water on her head without spilling, how to peel cassava without wasting, how to understand the language of weather by smelling the wind. Her world had become small, but each small thing felt full. One evening, the sky turned copper and the palm fronds rattled like applause. Kene and Aaliyah sat on a fallen log, sharing roasted corn. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a carved pendant in the shape of a palm leaf. "My father made this when I finished school," he said softly. He said, "However high you climb, remember the ground that holds the tree." "It's beautiful," Aaliyah said, and she meant the pendant, but she also meant him, the careful way he treated memories. He looked at her as if weighing a decision. Then he pressed the pendant into her palm. "Hold this for me for a while," he said. "Some things are safer with good people." Her throat tightened. "Are you sure?" "I am." She closed her fingers around it. The wood was warm from his skin. The next day, a black SUV rolled into the market square, shining like it didn't know dust. Men in dark shirts stepped out and spoke with the council elders. The rumor fish flashed again. "Visitors from the palace," people whispered. "They are watching." That night, Aaliyah sat on the stool by Auntie Joy's doorway, listening to frogs sing. Auntie Joy spoke gently. "Be careful with your heart, my niece. Village kindness makes city hearts soft. But not all stories end with songs." "I know," Aaliyah said. She did not say that some stories were already writing themselves in her chest. The morning of the festival arrived, huge and bright. Drums beat like 1,000 steady hearts. Everyone wore their best. Wrappers starched, agbatas wide, head ties reaching for heaven. Kene wore a clean white shirt and a simple red cap. He tied his rope across his shoulder as if he could not leave his old work behind even for a day. Aaliyah tied a green scarf over her braids and slipped the carved pendant around her neck on a soft cord. They walked together toward the palace courtyard through a road lined with palm fronds and calabashes. Children sang. Women ululated. Men lifted yams high as offerings. At the gate, guards stopped them. One guard looked at Kene, then at the elders standing behind him. Something passed between the men, quiet as a nod. The gate opened wider than it had for anyone else. Aaliyah felt a tremor in the air. "What's happening?" she asked. Kene's mouth twitched in a way that wasn't a smile. "Some truths," he said. "Wait for drums." Inside the courtyard, everything shone. The king sat on a low throne, face lined like dry riverbeds, eyes bright as oil lamps. The council stood in a half-circle like a human wall. The praise singer's voice rolled like thunder. Then the old king lifted his hand. The courtyard froze. "Bring the one who has walked with humility," he said. "Bring the one who has worked when no one asked him to. Bring my son." Aaliyah's heart tripped. Kene's shoulders rose and fell once. 2 guards stepped to Kene's side. He did not resist. He looked at Aaliyah, and in that look lived 1,000 unsent messages. She tried to swallow her fear, but it stuck like a dry yam in her throat. Then came the moment that would rewire everything she thought she knew. Kene stepping forward to kneel, the coral beads, the bronze bracelet, the roar of the people. Aaliyah's gourd falling. The king naming the crown prince. Kene pointing, past her. The woman in gold stepping into his choice like a queen into sunlight. The SUVs at the gate. The lawyer's folder. The words, already promised. The carved pendant on Aaliyah's chest suddenly felt heavy, as if it had become a small stone. The king's voice lost its steadiness. Promised to whom? The sunglasses woman lifted the contract. To the daughter of Chief Okafor. The tall woman in gold tilted her chin. To me. Kene's eyes closed for a second that stretched like a road with no end. When he opened them, he looked at Aaliyah, not like a prince to a stranger, but like a man who had run out of ways to divide himself in two. He parted his lips to speak. The drum master brought his stick down. The head drummer caught his wrist midair. The courtyard held its breath. And before any word could break the spell, a small voice piped from the back of the crowd, clear as a bell. Mama said promises can break if they were made with lies. The crowd turned to find the speaker. The kingship staff shook in the old king's hand. The lawyer frowned. The gold-dressed woman stiffened. Kene took one step forward. Who said that? The king asked. A path opened through the people. A boy in a torn school uniform stood there, clutching a cheap plastic flute. Right behind him, gripping his shoulder, was a figure Aaliyah had never seen before. A woman in plain cloth with a face carved by hard years and eyes that dared the world to look away. She raised her chin. I did, she said. And I brought proof. The courtyard exhaled as one. The king gestured for her to approach. Kene's hands curled into fists at his sides. Aaliyah pressed the pendant to her chest and felt it thump with her racing heart. The woman lifted something wrapped in brown paper. What she unwrapped made the first drumbeat of the day start again in Aaliyah's ears, slow and terrible. Your Highness, the woman said, holding the object up to the sun, before this crown rests on a lie, hear what the river kept for us. The crowd surged, a wave ready to break. The king leaned forward. The gold-dressed woman took a step back. Kene's eyes darkened like a sky before rain. And the drums, which had been waiting all morning to speak, refused to sound again. Before anyone in the courtyard could see what lay inside the brown paper, time seemed to pull backward like a tide. 2 weeks earlier, Udo village had been the size of Aaliyah's breath. Morning meant the stream and the chill of water on her ankles. Noon meant the smell of roasting yam. Evening meant the slow hush of crickets and the far drums practicing for the new yam festival. Her city life felt like a loud song turned down low. Here words did not have to shout to be heard. On the third morning after she arrived, a storm pushed in from the east. The sky looked like bruised fruit, the wind hissed through the palms. Today we don't climb, Auntie Joy warned. The trees will fight you. But by mid-morning the rain eased and Aaliyah saw Kene jogging past with his rope. You're going out? She called. He grinned. The sap runs sweetest after rain. You'll see. Teach me, she said, surprising herself. He showed her how to test the bark with his knuckles, how to feel the tree's mood with a palm. You don't cut, he told her. You ask. If the tree agrees, it gives. Aaliyah laughed. Trees talk to you? They talk to anyone who learns their patience. She watched him wrap the rope around his waist in the trunk, then lean back with trust that looked like faith. As he climbed, she saw scars at his sides, pale lines that told old stories. When he reached the crown, he tied himself and began to tap, moving with care. A boy came running with a message from the elder who kept the grove. A branch had snapped in the storm and blocked the pathway to Madame Ifeoma's hut. Kene climbed down, wiped his hands on his shirt and went to help. Aaliyah followed. The branch was heavy and wet. Flies buzzed around the splintered wood. 3 boys tried to lift it and failed. Kene dug his heels into the mud, set his rope, and showed them how to pull together, hauling with the tree's bend instead of against it. Count, he said. 1, 2, 3, pull. The branch rolled aside. The old woman clapped and danced a little dance. Take the first draw of sap today, she told Kene, pressing the gourd into his hands. He shook his head and handed it to her instead. Mama, you keep it. The first is for elders. Aaliyah saw the small things and stored them in the shelf of her heart. The way he bowed before he spoke to gray hair, the way he returned a lost coin to a child, the way he paid with work, not promises. Later they sat on a flat stone near the stream. Kene cleaned his knife with a leaf. What do you want to do when you go back? He asked. I braid hair, she said. I want to open my own shop. A place where girls can come in, drink zobo, talk, and leave feeling strong. Maybe I'll call it River Hands. Why that name? Because hands like mine help the river of someone's day flow better. He looked at her like the idea had settled into him. River Hands, he repeated, rolling the words slowly. It will fit you. Her phone buzzed again. Malik, come back. I miss you. I got us tickets to Chicago. She silenced the screen. She had left the city because Malik's love felt like a door that only opened when he wanted. In Udo, doors were simply tied open with cloth and anybody could bring light. As the festival drew near, talk about the palace swirled. Some villagers said the king would show himself and dance a few steps to bless the yams. Others said he would send the council because his legs had grown weak. A few men, the kind who gathered by the bottle stand to taste gossip, said Chief Okafor had been strutting around like a rooster. His daughter shops in Onitsha like she is already a queen, a carpenter muttered, shaking his head. But a hen's feathers do not make her an eagle. Aaliyah learned to laugh at what she didn't understand and to ask when it mattered. She asked about the coral beads and the titles, about the staff each chief held, about the story of the first yam and why it had to be eaten with care. She learned that respect in Udo was not loud. It was in the way you stood when elders entered, in how you greeted, in how you shared. One evening, as the sun fell like a tired drum into the trees, Aaliyah and Kene walked home by the footpath. A goat bleated. Smoke lifted from cooking fires. Do you ever wish to leave? She asked him. He took a long breath. Sometimes the road calls your feet, he said. But when you follow it, you should know what you are carrying. Some people carry pride. Some carry hunger. Some carry promises. What do you carry? He smiled at something private. A test. What kind of test? The kind a man gives himself when he wants to know the truth. She waited for him to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he stopped at Auntie Joy's door and in his careful way, asked after her health, checked the bandage, fetched water, and left without making a show of it. That night, rain fell again, soft like a mother's fingers on a sleeping child's hair. In the middle of the night, Aaliyah woke and saw a shape under her window. She almost cried out, then heard Kene's low voice. Auntie Joy, sleep. I left herbs on the stool. Boil them in the morning. Auntie Joy answered from her mat inside, God will bless your head, Kene. By the time the festival morning arrived, the village had decided who they thought Kene was. A good man who climbed trees and carried light into dark corners, a man not trying to be more than himself. Aaliyah had decided too. She ran her thumb over the carved palm leaf pendant he had given her and felt peace settle like a bird on her shoulder. And then the palace called him son. The courtyard crackled with heat and attention. The woman in gold stood like a flame at sunset. The lawyer's folder gleamed. A hush fell again as the woman in plain cloth unwrapped the brown paper. Inside lay a small wooden box, old and water-dark, bound with a thread of red cloth wrinkled from long damp. The woman's hands shook, not with fear, but with anger that had been waiting its turn. She untied the thread and lifted the lid. A circle of metal slept inside, heavy and dull until the sun kissed it and made it flash. The ring was thick, engraved with a coiled python and the palm mark of Udo, its inside etched with a tiny proverb. The river keeps truth for those who return. Several elders gasped. The king tried to stand and couldn't. He clutched the arm of his chair. That ring, he whispered, voice breaking, was lost. The woman nodded. On the night the flood rose 3 rainy seasons ago, she said, loud enough for even the far corners to hear, a horse stumbled at the old crossing. A man in a dark wrapper pressed your hand, your highness, and in the struggle the ring slipped. Men with torches searched until morning. The river carried it away. Chief Okafor's jaw tightened. The woman lifted her chin. I was on the other bank that night with my son. Flood takes and flood returns. 2 days ago the river spat this box into the reeds by our farm. I know what it is. Anybody who has paid taxes at the palace knows that mark. She pointed at the coiled python seal. The lawyer's sunglasses slid down her nose. She looked at the ring, then at her folder as if checking whether paper could overrule metal. The gold-dressed woman swallowed, throat working like a bird drinking. A murmur ran through the crowd like a bushfire beginning. The seal. The seal that stamps royal papers. The king's eyes filled. I never found it, he said almost to himself. Without it I refused to sign new decrees. I gave orders by word, not by seal. The woman in plain cloth bowed once and went on, steady. If any paper was stamped with this seal after it left your hand, it did not carry your will. It carried the will of whoever held it. She turned her face toward the lawyer and then, unblinking, toward Chief Okafor. The chief tried to smile and could not quite shape it. Sweat traced a line by his ear in the heat, though the umbrella boys shaded the council. Aaliyah looked at Kene. The muscles in his jaw jumped. His eyes had gone deep and still, like a river knowing where it must run. He stepped closer to the ring as if it were a story that might tell him what to do. Where did you find the box exactly? The king asked, his voice regaining strength as truth gave it bones. In the reeds by the old crossing, the woman said. Close to the place where men in a hurry pass when they don't want to use the main road. Every gaze climbed to Chief Okafor as if pulled by rope. He lifted his chin finally, a proud man forcing his face to be a mask. Your Highness, he said smoothly, anyone could have misplaced it. The river carries strange things. Let us not build a palace out of a fisherman's tale. The woman in gold, his daughter, shifted her weight. For the first time, her confidence cracked enough to show the girl inside the gold. The lawyer cleared her throat. The engagement agreement, she said too quickly, was signed with, due process. Bring the paper, the king said. His voice was old and full, like a drum carved long ago but still strong. She handed it over. The elders leaned in. The king did not touch it. He nodded to the oldest counselor, a man whose hands shook only when they wanted to. The elder lifted the sheet, turned it to the light, and frowned. The seal is clean, he said. Too clean. Your Highness's ring was cast with a hairline flaw here? He tapped a tiny corner. Royal tradition. It proves the seal is ours and not a copy. This one has that flaw. A moan rose from the people and then turned into a question that buzzed over every head. If the real ring was lost and is here now, who used it? The woman in plain cloth broke in, voice ringing. My son heard men on the riverbank 3 nights ago. He heard a name. Her eyes cut like a blade toward the chiefs. He heard someone say, make sure Okafor's girl looks like a queen at the festival. By the time the prince bows, the seal would have done its work. Aaliyah felt the courtyard tilt again. The gold-dressed woman's mouth dropped open in a small, involuntary sound. The lawyer clutched her folder tighter. Kene took another step forward, shoulders squared now, not as a tapper, not even as a lover, but as a lion's cub feeling his roar form. Father, he said softly to the king, the first time he had said that in public, the word tasting of salt in years, close the gates until we know the truth. The king lifted his palm, frowned. Guards? Before the order could finish, a sharp crack split the air. Everyone flinched. It was not a gun. It was the sound of a clay pot shattered at the far end of the courtyard. A child had knocked over an offering dish while trying to see, and in the scramble, a slim man in a dark wrapper darted toward the side gate like a fish shooting for deep water. Stop him, someone shouted. 2 guards lunged. The man slipped between them. The lawyer's face drained. Chief Okafor took an involuntary step toward the same gate, then checked himself, too late to be invisible, too early to be innocent. The king's voice boomed with a strength none had heard in months. Shut the gates, he commanded at last. Iron screamed. The wooden bars dropped. The courtyard became a sealed calabash, hot with truth and fear. The snake on the ring glinted in the sun. And as the echo of the bars died away, the plain-clothed woman lifted her hand again. Your Highness, she said, voice steady as river stones, the ring is not all. The river returned. From the folds of her wrapper, she drew out a small, wrapped bundle no bigger than a yam slice, stained with something dark, the shape of a seal pressed into wax visible through the cloth. The king stared. Chief Okafor's daughter whispered one word that sounded like a prayer and a warning together, Daddy. The guards turned as one toward the chief. And Kene, with the whole village's breath on his shoulders, stepped between the woman he had pointed at and the woman who wore his pendant, eyes locked on the bundle that might burn every lie down to ash. The air inside the palace courtyard turned thick, so thick that even the flies hovering near the yam offering seemed afraid to move. Sweat glistened on foreheads, and whispers rippled like snakes across the ground. The woman in the plain wrapper, her name the people soon learned was Mama Nkem, stood unshaken at the center of the storm. She held the small wax-stamped bundle to her chest, her voice low but carrying. Your Highness, she said, the truth is older than this crown. And it is time the truth speaks. King Udo raised his trembling hand. Speak then. Let the gods judge. Mama Nkem untied the last knot in the cloth. Inside lay several folded parchments, water-stained but still legible. She handed them to the eldest counselor, who adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. The first line was enough to draw gasps. By the authority of the royal seal of Udo, this document transfers all palm forest rights and tax privileges to Chief Okafor and his descendants. The elder looked up sharply. This was signed a year ago, but your highness, you were ill and bedridden at that time. You could not have signed this. The king nodded weakly. I did not. I signed no such thing. The crowd erupted into noise, shock, denial, outrage. Some of the villagers shouted, "We knew it! We knew the forests were being stolen." Others spat on the ground. The royal guards raised their spears to keep order. Aaliyah felt her heart hammer. She looked at Kene, whose jaw tightened until a muscle twitched near his cheek. He was breathing through his nose like a man holding back a storm. His eyes, once soft and kind when they met hers under the palm trees, now burned like coals. Chief Okafor tried to laugh, but it came out dry and forced. My king, we must be careful. Any fool can forge a seal. Mama Nkem's lips curved into a bitter smile. Then let the fool who forged it stand up and show himself. The river doesn't lie, Chief Okafor. It gives back what was stolen, when the time is right. The woman's words felt heavy, like stones dropping one by one into the silence. The guards closed in on Chief Okafor and his daughter, who began to tremble. The lawyer clutching the engagement contract slowly took a step backward, her folder pressed to her chest. But the king lifted his hand again. No one leaves this courtyard, he ordered. Not until we know everything. He turned his weary eyes to Kene. My son, you have lived among the people. You have seen what this theft has done, how the poor grow poorer while the chiefs grow fat. Tell me, what do you know of this? Kene's voice came steady and cold. Father, I went among the people because I wanted to understand who suffers when the palace forgets its children. I saw farmers pay 3 times their usual tax just to keep their small lands. I saw mothers crying because palm sap that once fed them was sold to strangers in the city. He paused, looking directly at Chief Okafor. And I followed the money. The courtyard buzzed again. Chief Okafor sneered. What nonsense is this? You're a palm wine tapper, not a king. Kene stepped closer. Yes. And that's why I saw what men like you don't see. Your trucks drive out of Udo every night filled with barrels of sap and palm oil, while you claim the villagers owe you for cutting from their own trees. Lies. Chief Okafor barked. But his voice cracked. You think your fake humility gives you power? You're just a boy who doesn't understand the ways of men. Mama Nkem spoke again. He understands enough to climb trees instead of stepping on people. Laughter broke out from the villagers at the edges of the courtyard, low, nervous, and defiant. The king slammed his staff on the ground. Silence. Aaliyah's eyes darted between Kene and the chief. Every second stretched longer than the last. She could feel something building, a truth too big to stay buried. The old counselor handed the forged papers to the king. Your Highness, I confirm the signatures match your handwriting perfectly, except these marks were not written by your hand. Someone studied your writing. The king's voice hardened. Then only those close to the palace could have done it. The lawyer's hands began to shake. I only followed instructions. The documents came already stamped with your seal. From whom? The king demanded. She hesitated. Her eyes slid toward Chief Okafor. And my client, Chief Okafor's office, she stammered. He said the documents had already been approved. The gold-dressed woman, Chief Okafor's daughter, gasped. Father, she whispered. Tell them she's lying. But her father said nothing. His silence was the answer no one wanted to hear. The crowd murmured louder now, fury spilling like hot oil. The elders conferred among themselves. The king slumped slightly, the weight of betrayal pressing down like age itself. Then Kene spoke again. Father, there is more. I disguised myself as a palm wine tapper not only to find a woman with an honest heart, but to uncover those who have made this kingdom bleed. Chief Okafor has been using your seal to sell Udo's land and funnel the money through shell companies in Enugu. The chief's face twisted. You lie. Kene didn't blink. The bank documents are with the royal treasurer. And when you ran your men through the old river path, you dropped the box that Mama Nkem found. You thought the flood would keep your secret. You took another step forward. But truth is like palm wine. It ferments. It will rise. The villagers erupted in cheers, chants, and shock all at once. Some shouted Kene's name, others cursed the chief. The guards tightened their formation around the royal dais. Chief Okafor's daughter burst into tears. "Daddy, is it true? Did you really?" Her father snapped, "Quiet." He turned to the king, face pale but proud. "Even if I did what you say, I did it for the good of Udo. You've been sick. Someone had to take charge. Your son, this boy, was nowhere to be found." The king's voice thundered. "He was among the people, learning their hearts, while you were among thieves, stealing their bread." The courtyard shook with the echo. Aaliyah felt a mix of awe and fear. The man she'd thought was simple, barefoot and humble, was now a lion roaring at injustice. And the man who'd pretended to be noble now looked smaller than his own shadow. Then the unexpected happened. The gold-dressed woman, the chief's daughter, fell to her knees before the king. "Please, your highness. My father told me the crown prince was dead. He said this marriage would unite the council and protect the throne. I didn't know." Her sobs tore through the courtyard. Even Kene looked away, pained. The king nodded to a guard. "Take her to the palace chamber. She will be treated kindly until we know all." 2 guards helped her up gently. But Chief Okafor, seeing his power slipping like sand through his fingers, made a desperate move. He turned to the lawyer. "You. Tell them it was your plan. You brought the papers." The lawyer stumbled backward, terrified. "No. You." He lunged at her. Before anyone could react, Kene stepped in, catching Chief Okafor's arm mid-swing. The crowd gasped. For a moment the 2 men locked eyes, youth and corruption staring each other down. "Enough!" Kene roared. He twisted the chief's wrist and flung him aside. The man stumbled and fell into the dust, his wrapper stained with sweat and shame. The villagers began shouting, "Justice! Justice!" The king rose slowly from his throne, gripping his staff for strength. "Chief Okafor, you have betrayed the trust of Udo. For years I wondered where our wealth went, why our children starved. Now I see the rot in my own court." He looked at Kene. "My son, today I thank the gods for your disguise. They led you to truth through humility." Kene bowed slightly. "I only wanted to see who would love me if I had nothing." A hush fell again, soft, reverent, and heavy. Then Aaliyah felt every eye turn toward her. Even Kene's. She wanted to disappear, to hide from the 1,000 questions in their stares. Did she love him for who he was, or for the man she thought he was? Could she even answer that now? The king's voice broke her thoughts. "The gods have used her too," he said. "For through her kindness, my son remembered his heart." Mamankem smiled faintly. "And the heart that remembers truth will always find its crown." The guards dragged Chief Okafor to his knees. The crowd chanted for punishment, but the king lifted his hand again. "Let the council decide his fate," he said. "For now, the matter of the throne must continue." He turned to Kene. "My son, the kingdom awaits your choice. Who stands beside you, not in gold but in truth?" Kene's gaze drifted from the gold-dressed woman being led away to the villagers, then to Aaliyah. The pendant he'd carved hung still around her neck, glowing faintly in the sunlight. He took a slow breath, stepped toward her and reached out a hand. The crowd murmured. The drums began to roll, soft, uncertain, as if even they were holding their breath. But before Kene could speak, a horn blared outside the gates, sharp, desperate, wrong. A guard rushed in panting. "Your Highness, riders from the northern road. The old river has flooded again, and something else washed ashore." Everyone turned. The king's staff wavered. "What now?" he whispered. The guard swallowed hard. "A body, your majesty. Wearing the royal seal." A silence fell that even the drums dared not break. Aaliyah clutched her pendant as Kene's hand slowly fell back to his side, his face hardening again. Because deep inside him he already knew whose body it might be. The palace erupted into confusion. Women gasped. Chiefs murmured among themselves. Even the drums, which had been cautiously keeping rhythm, fell into an uneasy silence. The guard who brought the message knelt, dust covering his knees. "Your Majesty," he said, still panting, "the men who went to fetch water from the northern river found him. The body bears the royal crest burned into the left wrist. He wears garments only a prince would wear." The king gripped his staff tighter. "Bring him here." Kene's voice dropped to a whisper, his tone steady but dark. "Father, if another man carries the royal crest, then this isn't just a matter of fraud. Someone has tried to replace the royal line itself." The king looked at him sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Kene answered, "that while I pretended to be a palm wine tapper, someone else was pretending to be me." The crowd drew in their breath all at once. Even Aaliyah felt her blood turn cold. Mama Nkem's eyes darted toward Chief Okafor. The lies stretch further than we thought, she murmured. Moments later, 2 guards entered through the courtyard gate, carrying a stretcher covered in a palm frond mat. The people stepped aside, whispering prayers. They laid the stretcher before the king. The chief counselor bent down, lifted the mat, and a collective gasp spread through the crowd. It was a young man, dark-skinned, tall, with a faint resemblance to Kene. He wore the royal coral beads and white linen now torn and water-soaked. His left wrist bore a faint burn mark shaped like a crown. Kene's hands tightened into fists. "That's my mother's mark," he whispered. "The one the midwife burned lightly when I was born, proof to the oracle that the prince was blessed." The king's face turned ashen. "Then who is this?" Mama Nkem stepped forward, steady as ever. "Look at his neck," she said. The elder nearest to the body leaned closer and pulled aside the collar. There, faint but visible, was the tattooed crest of the Okafor family. The king's staff hit the ground like thunder. "Okafor." The disgraced chief, still kneeling and guarded, trembled. "Your Majesty, please, listen." "Speak," the king roared. "Did you create a false prince? Did you plan to place him on my throne?" The chief's lips quivered. For the first time, his arrogance crumbled completely. "Your Majesty, it was to secure my daughter's future. The council doubted that your son would return. I found a boy, a distant cousin of mine. We trained him, taught him the palace customs. We made him wear the mark." The courtyard broke into cries of outrage. Treachery. Abomination. Death to the deceivers. Even the elders looked disgusted. The king rose with a strength that shocked everyone. His voice echoed off the marble walls. "You forged my seal, you sold the lands of my fathers, and you created a false heir to my throne. For that, you will not only face the council, you will face the gods." The guards seized Chief Okafor by the arms. His daughter, the woman in gold, sobbed uncontrollably as they dragged him away. The lawyer dropped her folder and collapsed beside her client, begging the guards not to take her too. Kene stood rooted, staring at the lifeless body. For all the man's sins, he was still human, and deceit had led him to a watery grave. Aaliyah stepped quietly beside him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He turned to her slowly. "He wore my mark, Aaliyah. If the river hadn't told the truth, I might have been declared an impostor in my own home." She reached for his hand but stopped herself midway. "The truth found you because you lived it," she said. The king, now breathing heavily, motioned to Kene. "My son, today the ancestors have revealed the wickedness that shadowed our land. I have seen the strength in your heart. You hid among the people not to shame this palace, but to purify it." He placed his hand on Kene's shoulder. "The throne of Udo is yours. You are now the true crown prince before heaven and earth." The villagers cheered, first uncertainly then louder until the courtyard trembled with joy. The drums resumed their rhythm, thunderous and full. But amidst the noise, Aaliyah felt tears burn behind her eyes. Because though everyone rejoiced, she saw the shadow on Kene's face, the burden of a truth too heavy for celebration. The king gestured to the guards. "Prepare the royal hall. The coronation rites will begin at sunset." Kene bowed, but his eyes lingered on Aaliyah. As the king was helped back toward his chambers, Kene whispered, "Wait for me by the old palm grove after sunset." Her heart skipped. "Why?" He gave her a look she would never forget. "Because before the crown chooses my head, I must choose my heart." Evening fell over Udo like gold poured on shadow. The celebration began, drums, horns and laughter filling the village air. But by the grove the world was quieter. Fireflies hovered, and the palms swayed softly in the dusk breeze. Aaliyah stood alone, clutching the wooden pendant he'd given her. She remembered every word, every laugh, every morning they'd walked under the dew. And though her heart fluttered, she feared what his words might mean. She heard footsteps. Kene appeared, still dressed in the simple white of the day's ceremony, but without the beads or crown. His face glowed faintly in the firelight. "I almost didn't come," Aaliyah admitted. "I was afraid you wouldn't," he said. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. "You knew who you were all along," she said finally. "And I had no idea." He nodded slowly. "I had to be sure the woman I loved would see me, not the title. I met many who smiled only when I offered gold. But you," he looked at her, eyes soft again, "you laughed when I fell off a tree and you helped me bandage my hand. You gave without expecting. That's what love is supposed to look like." Aaliyah's breath caught. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because the truth sometimes needs time to be ready," he said quietly. And because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd stop loving me once you saw the palace walls behind me. Tears gathered in her eyes. You're wrong, Kene. I didn't love you for what you had. I loved you for who you were, before I knew the beads, before the crown, before this madness. He reached for her hand then, his calloused fingers warm and real. Aaliyah, will you stay? The words trembled in the air. But before she could answer, the sharp sound of hooves tore through the night. They turned. A rider galloped into the grove, shouting breathlessly, Your Highness! The king, your father, has collapsed. Kene's hand fell away from hers. The rider dismounted. He was speaking with the council when he fell. They say he called your name before losing consciousness. Aaliyah's heart dropped. Kene turned to her, pain slicing through his face. I have to go. I'll come with you, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. Stay close. They ran through the dark path back toward the palace, fireflies scattering around them. The festival drums had stopped again, replaced by cries and hurried footsteps. When they reached the royal hall, elders surrounded the king's seat. The old man lay slumped, his staff beside him. He was breathing but faintly. Kene knelt beside him, gripping his hand. Father, I'm here. The king's eyes fluttered open. My son, he whispered weakly, the gods, they have tested us. Promise me you will rule with truth. Promise you will marry only for love. I promise, Kene said, tears in his eyes. The king smiled faintly. Then Udo will know peace. He closed his eyes again as the healers carried him away. The room filled with anxious murmurs. Kene stood, the weight of destiny pressing on his shoulders. He turned to Aaliyah, but before he could speak, the council elder raised his hand. The king may not survive the night, he said gravely. The crown must pass before dawn. The prince will be crowned before sunrise. The hall went silent. Aaliyah felt her chest tighten. Kene looked at her, long, searching, helpless. And she realized that in a few hours he wouldn't just belong to her anymore. He would belong to a kingdom. Night in Udo had never felt so heavy. The palace torches burned low, their flames trembling as if the spirits themselves held their breath. Outside, villagers knelt in silence, praying that their king would wake. Inside the great hall, the crown rested on a stool draped with white cloth, glowing faintly under the lantern light. Kene paced before it, his mind spinning. Each echo of his footsteps seemed to strike against his thoughts. A prince, a son, a ruler, and a man in love. Aaliyah stood at the far end of the hall. She hadn't moved since they brought the crown in. Her fingers twisted around the wooden pendant he had given her, clutching it as though it could slow time. Kene, she said softly, the healer says your father's pulse is weak. He might not make it till dawn. Kene stopped walking. The muscles in his jaw flexed. I know. He wants you to rule, she continued, but he also asked you to marry for love. Don't forget that. Kene turned toward her, his eyes glimmering in the dim light. Do you think I can do both? Aaliyah swallowed. I think love and duty don't always share the same bed. He walked toward her, each step measured, heavy with things unsaid. When I went among the people, he began, I thought I was testing them. But the truth? I was testing myself. I wanted to know if I could live without the crown, if my worth was mine, not my father's. He stopped just a breath away from her. Then you came. And you reminded me what honesty looks like when no one is watching. Her heart ached. Kene. Before she could say more, the royal priest entered, leaning on his staff. His robe was covered in cowrie shells that rattled like whispers of destiny. My prince, he said solemnly, the oracle demands the rites begin before the first cock crow. The gods must see a crowned ruler when the sun rises. Kene stiffened. I will come soon. The priest looked between the two of them and smiled knowingly. The gods watch not only who wears the crown, but also who stands beside him. When he left, Aaliyah turned away, unable to meet Kene's eyes. So it's decided, she murmured. You'll be king by morning. He moved closer. Not decided yet. A king is nothing without his heart. She gave a faint, broken laugh. Your heart belongs to your people now, Kene. Silence hung between them, long enough for the night birds to start calling from the trees. Just before dawn, the royal drums began to beat again. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, steady, final. The palace courtyard filled with light from hundreds of torches. The villagers gathered again, wearing white wrappers and beads. The air smelled of palm oil, incense, and expectation. Kene walked out dressed in the traditional prince's robe, white as the moon, embroidered with gold thread. Around his neck hung the coral beads of the ancestors. The people bowed as he passed, murmuring, "Is Kene, may the gods guide you." But Kene's eyes searched for only one face. Aaliyah stood at the back of the crowd, her scarf drawn over her braids, tears glinting in her eyes. When she saw him, she forced a smile. He nodded slightly, one last shared breath between two worlds about to drift apart. The priest lifted the crown. "By the decree of the ancestors, the son of Udo shall take his father's place. He shall rule with truth and courage. Let him kneel." Kene knelt before the stool, the first rays of dawn touching his back. The drums grew louder, shaking the ground. "May your reign bring peace," the priest intoned. "May your heart stay humble." He raised the crown high. The people cheered. But just as the crown was about to touch Kene's head, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Stop. The prince cannot be crowned yet." The drums froze mid-beat. Every head turned. Aaliyah gasped. Through the crowd pushed a young woman in royal blue robes, tall, fierce-eyed, and carrying a small gourd wrapped in palm leaves. Two guards followed her, trying to hold her back. The priest frowned. "Who dares interrupt the sacred rite?" "I am Nena," the woman said boldly, "daughter of the late Queen Amaka. And I bring a message from the gods." Murmurs exploded like sparks. The queen's daughter? But the queen died years ago. She had another child? Kene rose slowly, eyes narrowed. "What message?" Nena lifted the gourd. "The oracle says no man should wear the crown while blood remains unpurified in the palace. The truth is not complete." The priest's face paled. "Explain yourself." She opened the gourd, and inside was a folded cloth, stained with dried blood and sealed with the royal emblem. "This," she declared, "was hidden beneath the old queen's bed before she died. It is her confession." The king's advisors hurried forward, taking the cloth to the priest. The old man unsealed it with trembling hands and read the faded writing aloud. "If this reaches my husband or my son, let it be known. I feared the prophecy that said the crown would fall into ruin through envy and deceit. To protect my child, I sent one twin away at birth, for the gods demanded only one heir. The boy left with my sister carries the mark of the crown. The other left here was born first, but without the mark. Forgive me." A stunned silence swept the courtyard. Kene's heart stopped. "Twins?" The priest reread the line. "One twin bears the mark." He looked up. "Kene, you have that mark on your wrist." Kene nodded slowly. "Yes. But that means," the priest continued, "somewhere out there, another son of Udo lives." The people gasped. The villagers looked at one another, terrified and awed. The priest turned to Nena. "And where is this other twin?" Nena lifted her chin. "He is gone. He was the man found dead by the river." The crowd shouted. Aaliyah covered her mouth in shock. Kene's breath left him. "That man was my brother?" Nena nodded, her voice trembling now. "The one you called an impostor was your blood." The courtyard erupted in chaos, cries, wails, disbelief. The priest stumbled backward, the crown slipping from his grasp. It hit the ground with a dull clang. Aaliyah ran to Kene, grabbing his arm. "Kene, listen, don't let this destroy you." But Kene didn't hear her. His eyes were lost somewhere beyond the crowd, where truth and sorrow tangled like vines. "My brother, they used him, they made him a puppet, and I condemned him without knowing." He fell to his knees, clutching his head. "The gods forgive me." The priest steadied himself and raised his staff. "Then the prophecy is fulfilled. The firstborn has perished through deceit, and the surviving twin must cleanse the land with truth. Only then may he wear the crown." He pointed his staff toward the river. "Go, Prince Kene. Wash your brother's mark from your wrist in the water that took him. Until then the crown belongs to no one." The crowd fell silent again. Kene stood slowly, his eyes hollow but resolute. "If that is what must be done, then I will do it." He turned to Aaliyah. "Wait for me, no matter how long it takes." She nodded through her tears. "I'll wait even if the moon forgets to rise." He gave her one last look, then walked through the crowd barefoot toward the northern road, where the river glimmered under the dawn. And as he disappeared into the mist, the drums began again, slow, mournful, echoing like the heartbeat of a kingdom waiting for its true king to return. The mist over the river looked like breath from the mouths of ghosts. Kene stood barefoot at the water's edge, the hem of his white robe soaked brown by the wet sand. The first sun of morning had begun to rise, painting streaks of gold across the water, but there was no warmth in it. The river hissed quietly as it flowed, like it remembered everything it had taken: the crown, the ring, and now a brother's life. He knelt slowly, cupping the water in both hands. It felt cold enough to sting. "Brother," he whispered, "I did not know you, but the same blood that made you suffer flows in me. May your spirit find peace." Behind him stood Mama Nkem, wrapped in her plain wrapper as always. "My prince," she said, her voice gentle, "some rivers wash, others reveal. When the gods send you to one, they're not asking you to forget, they're asking you to remember rightly." Kene turned to her. "You seem to know more than most. Tell me, did my mother's sister live near here?" Mama Nkem's eyes lowered. "For a while," she said softly. "She was my cousin. When she left the palace with a newborn child, I helped her hide. We never knew the truth behind it. Only that the baby was marked for greatness." Kene's chest tightened. "So you've known all along that I might not be the only one." "I suspected," she admitted. "But the palace has long ears, and truth told too soon can be punished before it's understood." He stared at the water again. "Then I condemned my own blood because I didn't know." She stepped closer. "Don't drown in guilt, my prince. The gods let the river return what it takes. Sometimes it brings back redemption." Kene looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Mama Nkem reached into her wrapper and drew out a small water-stained leather pouch. "When they found your brother's body," she said, "he was clutching this." She handed it to him. Inside was a piece of folded bark parchment, barely legible, but the handwriting clear. Kene read slowly, his lips trembling as he spoke the words aloud. "If my brother lives, tell him I was never his enemy. I was used. They said he was gone and that I was born to take his place. But I remember dreams of a face like mine. Tell him. Tell him I climbed the palm trees too. Tell him I'm sorry." Kene's hand shook. "He remembered me," he whispered. "Even though we were separated at birth." Mama Nkem placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you must do what he could not, bring truth back to the land." Kene closed his eyes, dipped his marked wrist into the river, and whispered the ancient cleansing prayer the priest had taught him as a boy. "Let deceit sink. Let truth rise." The water swirled around his arm, and when he lifted it again, the burn mark of the crown was gone, washed away like the end of a long lie. He stood, eyes fierce and clear. "I will return to the palace. But this time not to wear the crown out of duty. I will wear it for justice." Mama Nkem nodded. "Then Udo will finally have peace." Back in the palace, tension thickened the air like smoke. The council waited in uneasy silence while the priests finished the last of their chants. The king lay still in his chambers, his breathing shallow but steady. Aaliyah had stayed by his side all night, tending to the lamps, refusing to leave even when the other servants grew tired. When Kene entered, drenched and barefoot, everyone turned. His eyes carried something new, an authority deeper than the crown itself. The oldest counselor spoke first. "My prince, have you done as the oracle commanded?" "I have," Kene replied. His voice filled the hall, calm but commanding. "The mark is gone. My brother's soul is at peace." The elders murmured blessings. The priest approached with the crown once more. "Then you are ready. But before we complete the rite, you must decide who stands beside you, your queen." All eyes shifted toward Aaliyah. Her heart began to pound. She hadn't expected this moment to come so soon. Her hands shook slightly as she wiped her tears and looked at Kene. He walked toward her slowly, stopping just an arm's length away. "Aaliyah Carter," he said, his voice low but strong, "you came to this village to care for your aunt. You could have left after the first week, but you stayed. You worked, you listened, you treated our people like your own. When I was just a palm wine tapper, you saw me, not what I could give but who I was." A murmur of approval ran through the room. "But now," he continued, "I am not just a man. I am a prince about to be king. If you say yes, this life will never again be quiet or simple. It will be full of eyes, expectations, and burdens. I will not ask you to wear that crown unless you choose it freely." Aaliyah's throat tightened. "Kene, I don't care about crowns or gold. I care about the man who gave his palm wine to widows, who carried old men across the stream, who loved me before he knew if he could keep me." The room went silent. Kene smiled faintly. "Then the gods have spoken." He turned to the priest. "Begin the rite." The drums began again, deep and rolling, echoing through the marble halls. The priest lifted the crown high, chanting blessings over the new ruler. When he placed it on Kene's head, sunlight streamed through the high window and struck the gold. The villagers outside cheered, "Long live King Kene. Long live the son of Udo." Aaliyah felt her heart swell as Kene turned and met her eyes. He reached for her hand. The crowd erupted again when he declared, "And let it be known before gods and men, Aaliyah Carter, daughter of the earth, shall be queen beside me." The people fell to their knees, some cheering, others weeping with joy. Even the elders nodded in approval. But as Kene took her hand and led her to the dais, a faint wind swept through the hall, dimming the torches. The priest frowned, whispering a quick prayer. The flames sputtered, then steadied. An omen, one elder whispered. The ancestors still watch. Kene heard him but did not falter. He raised Aaliyah's hand and faced the people. The reign of deceit is over, he declared. From today Udo will live by truth. No man will rise by lying, and no woman will be silenced by pride. The crowd cheered louder, the sound echoing across the hills. And in the distance, thunder rumbled softly, a warning or perhaps applause from the gods. Later that night, when the festivities had calmed and the moon rose full over the palace roofs, Kene stood on the balcony with Aaliyah beside him. The air smelled of rain and palm wine. "You did it," she said quietly. "Your people have peace again." He looked out toward the horizon. "Peace," he murmured. "But not rest. There are debts still unpaid and stories still unfinished." She turned to him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He faced her, his expression unreadable. "Before my brother died, someone used him. Someone higher than Okafor. I need to know who gave the final command." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "You think there's someone else behind this?" He nodded slowly. "Every river has a source. And this one hasn't stopped flowing." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the valley. Kene took Aaliyah's hand. "Tomorrow we find out who really wanted the throne of Udo to fall." The thunder cracked again, rolling through the mountains like a promise of war to come. And as the crown glimmered under the moonlight, the new king of Udo realized, his battle for truth had only just begun. Thunder rolled again, a deep growl echoing through the hills. In the distance, lightning flashed over the river where Kene had cleansed his mark. The kingdom slept fitfully, but in the palace, no one truly rested. Aaliyah woke to the sound of soft voices outside their chamber, guards changing shifts, priests murmuring night prayers and footsteps pacing the corridor. Kene stood by the window, still dressed in his robe though hours had passed since his coronation. His silhouette cut a lonely figure against the moonlight. "You haven't slept," Aaliyah said softly, sitting up. He turned to her. His eyes were shadowed, thoughtful. "Kings don't sleep when their father lies between life and death." Aaliyah got out of bed, walked to him and touched his arm gently. "The healer said he's holding on. Maybe he just needs peace to return." Kene exhaled, shaking his head. "Peace won't return until the last hand that fed on this kingdom's blood is exposed." Okafor wasn't working alone, Aaliyah. Someone else forged the seal, someone who knew every royal secret. Her brow furrowed. "You mean, someone inside the palace?" He nodded. "Someone close. The kind of person my father trusted." At that moment, a guard knocked gently at the door. "My king, the chief counselor requests your presence in the royal study." Kene straightened. "At this hour?" "Yes, your majesty." "He says it's urgent." Aaliyah glanced at him, uneasy. "It's the middle of the night, Kene." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll go. Stay here and lock the door until I return." "Kene," she began, but he pressed a finger to her lips. "Promise me," he whispered. She nodded reluctantly. "I promise." He kissed her forehead and left. The royal study was dimly lit, its oil lamps flickering weakly. The walls smelled of parchment, dust, and secrets. The chief counselor, an old man named Obioma, stood hunched over a pile of scrolls, his back to the door. "You sent for me," Kene said, stepping inside. Obioma turned slowly, his lined face half in shadow. "My king. Forgive me for disturbing your rest." "What is it?" The old man gestured to the desk. "I found these records among Chief Okafor's belongings. Financial ledgers, trade permits, and correspondence. One name appears often." Kene frowned. "Whose?" Obioma slid a folded letter across the desk. Kene picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and horribly familiar. The letter read, "Ensure the prince's disappearance is permanent. Use the double. The kingdom must never know two heirs existed. When all is done, send the river what it demands. Signed, Her Grace, the Dowager Queen Mother of Udo." Kene's hands froze. "The Dowager Queen, my grandmother?" Obioma nodded gravely. "It appears so. She has long held influence behind the throne, ever since your mother passed." Kene's pulse pounded in his ears. "She ordered my brother's death?" "I fear so, your majesty. She must have believed the prophecy, that only one twin could live for Udo to survive. She may have thought she was protecting the kingdom." Kene's voice turned cold. "She was protecting her power." Obioma bowed his head. The priests will need proof before any accusation. But the handwriting matches her royal correspondence perfectly. Kene stared at the letter again, the edges trembling in his fingers. If this is true, then my brother's blood stains the royal house itself. Obioma stepped closer, lowering his voice. There is more. The Dowager Queen left the palace 2 nights ago before your coronation. The guard said she was traveling to the old temple in Naji Forest, for a ritual. Kene's eyes darkened. Then that's where I'll go. Obioma's eyes widened. At night? That forest is forbidden. Then let the forbidden hear my footsteps, Kene said, already turning for the door. Back in their chamber, Aaliyah sat awake, listening to the storm fade. The silence afterward was worse. It hummed like danger. Then came the sound of feet rushing down the hallway. She ran to the door and opened it just as 2 guards passed by. What's happening? She demanded. The king has gone out, one said, not meeting her eyes. He left for Naji Forest. Her stomach dropped. At this hour? Alone. The guard hesitated. He forbade anyone to follow. He said the truth calls him. Aaliyah grabbed her shawl. Then I'll follow him myself. The forest lay an hour's ride from the palace, a tangle of ancient trees where even the moonlight feared to enter. Aaliyah rode hard through the mud, her lantern flickering wildly. The night smelled of wet earth and incense. When she reached the edge of the temple ruins, she dismounted, tying her horse to a fallen branch. The air here was cold and heavy, filled with the hiss of unseen snakes. She crept forward until she saw the glow of torches. At the center of the clearing stood Kene, facing an older woman dressed in dark royal robes, her head crowned with coral beads blackened by age. The Dowager Queen Mother. You shouldn't have come, child, the old woman said, her voice surprisingly calm. This is where kings learn their place before the gods. Kene's voice was hard as iron. You wrote the letter. You ordered the river to take my brother. The old woman's eyes glimmered in the torchlight. I did what had to be done. The prophecy was clear. 2 sons cannot live or Udo will die. You were hidden from me by your mother's deceit, so I acted to protect the throne. By murder? Kene shouted. By obedience, she hissed. You think you're king now, but you have only seen one corner of power. I built this kingdom with my hands while your father prayed and your mother wept. I will not let it crumble under guilt and love stories. Aaliyah gasped from behind the trees. The Queen Mother's head snapped up. Who's there? Aaliyah stepped out, her lantern trembling in her hand. Someone who's not afraid to tell the truth. The old woman sneered. Ah, the foreign girl. The palm tapper's plaything. Kene stepped between them. You will not speak to her that way. The Queen Mother's lips curled. You think I care? You think love will save you from prophecy? She lifted her staff. The carved snake at its top glowed faintly red. If the gods demand one life for peace, then I will give them yours. Lightning split the sky above them. Kene reached for his blade, eyes blazing. Then let them judge between us. The Queen Mother raised the staff higher. You were born second, boy. The firstborn was meant to rule. No, Kene said quietly. The firstborn was meant to live. He lunged forward, striking the staff with his sword. The collision sent a flash of blinding light through the temple ruins. The torches exploded into sparks. Aaliyah screamed as thunder crashed and wind howled through the trees. When the light faded, the Queen Mother lay sprawled on the ground, her staff split in 2. Kene stood trembling, smoke rising from the blade in his hand. Aaliyah ran to him. Kene, are you hurt? He dropped the sword. No. But it's over. The old woman groaned, blood seeping from a cut on her temple. She looked up at him, tears glistening in her wrinkled eyes. The prophecy, it said 2 sons cannot live. Kene knelt beside her, voice breaking. Then the gods were wrong. Only lies needed to die. The old woman's eyes fluttered once more, and then went still. The forest fell silent. Even the rain stopped. Kene bowed his head, whispering a prayer. Aaliyah held him, her face buried against his shoulder as the wind carried the last embers of the torches away. By dawn they returned to Udo, weary but alive. The king's chambers were quiet. The healers came running, joy on their faces. Your Majesty, one cried, the old king is awake. Kene rushed to his father's side. The king smiled faintly, weak but alert. My son, he whispered, the darkness has lifted. Kene took his hand. Yes, father. It's over. The king's eyes softened as he saw Aaliyah standing beside his son. And I see the light that carried you through it. He closed his eyes again, whispering a blessing. May Udo's crown never again be heavy with lies. Aaliyah and Kene knelt together by his bed, their fingers intertwined, while the dawn sunlight spilled across the room like mercy. But even as peace settled over the palace, far away in the deep part of the forest, the wind shifted, and a faint whisper rose from the broken staff of the dead Queen Mother. Prophecy never dies. It only waits. The breeze carried the sound toward the palace, where the new king slept beside his queen, unaware that another storm was already stirring on the horizon. The days that followed seemed almost like a dream. Birds sang again in the courtyards, children ran through the streets of Udo, and the drums of celebration replaced the wails of fear. The kingdom, long choked by deceit, breathed freely once more. The markets overflowed with color. Women in bright Ankara wrappers laughed as they sold fresh produce. Men sang old songs as they built stalls for the coming harvest. Everywhere people spoke the same name with pride, King Kene, the humble palm wine tapper who brought truth back to Udo. Yet even in joy, shadows lingered. Kene stood at the palace balcony overlooking the courtyard, watching life return to his people. The crown on his head glinted beneath the morning sun, but his face was far from calm. The river prophecy whispered in his mind like an old wound that refused to heal. Prophecy never dies. It only waits. Aaliyah approached quietly, her white gown brushing softly against the marble. "You've been standing here since dawn," she said gently. "You should rest." He smiled faintly. "Kings don't rest. Not while ghosts are still awake." Aaliyah frowned. "You mean your grandmother?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "The priest burned her staff at sunrise, but last night I dreamed of her. She stood by the river, holding the broken pieces, and said, 'You can wash away blood, but not destiny.'" Aaliyah shivered. "Dreams can lie, Kene. You've carried too much pain lately. Maybe your mind is just trying to let go." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe she's warning me." He looked down at the people below. "The river floods faster now. The fishermen say it's restless. I can't ignore that." Aaliyah sighed, taking his hand. "Then face it, but not alone. You have me now and you have your people. Don't fight shadows when light stands beside you." He turned to her, his eyes softening. "You always speak like the earth, steady, patient." "That's because I came from it," she smiled. "The city taught me to chase noise, but the village taught me to listen." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Then help me listen." That evening the palace courtyard filled with torches. The elders gathered for the first council under Kene's reign. The old king, though frail, sat beside his son, proud but silent. The high priest raised his staff. "We bless this reign with palm wine and truth," he declared, pouring libation on the ground. "But before joy blinds us, we must ask, what of the prophecy?" A murmur rippled through the hall. One elder, a stern woman named Chief Ngozi, stood. "The prophecy spoke of twins and the fall of Udo. We have seen one twin die. But the words say, so long as two hearts of one blood beat under the same sky, peace shall be uncertain." The room went cold. Kene frowned. "I thought the prophecy ended with my brother's death." Chief Ngozi shook her head. "That's what we assumed. But if he left a child behind, the bloodline continues. And the god's warning remains." Kene's heartbeat quickened. "A child?" Aaliyah's hand tightened around his. "That can't be possible. He was trained, controlled, he barely had a life of his own." But the old priest spoke softly. "Sometimes even prisoners leave legacies they never knew." The council fell into uneasy silence. Kene's voice grew firm. "If a child exists, I will find them, not to harm them but to protect them. My brother's mistakes were not his child's fault. I'll not repeat my grandmother's cruelty." The king nodded approvingly from his chair. "That is the heart of a true ruler." But in the far corner of the hall, a young palace messenger hurried in, breathless. "Your Majesty. A traveler seeks an audience. She carries the late prince's pendant and asks for sanctuary." Kene's eyes widened. "Bring her in." Moments later, the guards entered with a woman wrapped in a dusty shawl. She was young, barely 20, with tired eyes and a small child clinging to her hip. The little boy had dark skin, wide eyes, and a faint birthmark on his wrist shaped exactly like a crown. The hall erupted in gasps. The woman knelt low. "Your Majesty," she said, voice trembling, "my name is Ifyananya. I was a servant at Chief Okafor's estate. The man you called the impostor, he saved me. When I fled his master's cruelty, he hid me in the forest. He didn't know who he truly was until his final days." She lifted the child's hand. "Before he died, he told me to find Udo's true king. He said, 'Give him my son, so my blood may not die with shame.'" Kene rose slowly, his heart pounding. The boy's eyes met his, and in them he saw his brother's gentleness, the same river-deep sadness. The high priest whispered, "The prophecy returns." Aaliyah stepped forward, placing a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "You've come to the right place," she said softly. "No child of Udo will be punished for his father's sins." Kene knelt beside the boy, removing the golden ring from his own hand. He slipped it onto the child's tiny finger. "Your father was my brother," he said quietly. "He died because others used him. But you will live free and your name will not carry shame." Tears filled the young woman's eyes. "Thank you, my king." The priest raised his staff. "Then let the gods bear witness. Blood has found blood, and mercy has triumphed over vengeance." The crowd cheered, and for a moment the prophecy seemed defeated. But as the torches flickered, a sudden gust swept through the hall. The flames bent low, almost snuffed out. The priest's eyes widened. "The river spirits stir again," he murmured. "Something still waits." Kene looked around, his instincts alert. "What do you mean?" Before the priest could answer, thunder cracked outside, so loud that the hall trembled. Guards rushed in shouting, "Your Majesty! The river has overflowed its banks. The water is rising faster than ever before, flooding the lower villages." Panic rippled through the court. Kene turned to Aaliyah. "This is not coincidence. The prophecy spoke of a flood. The river is angry." Aaliyah grabbed his arm. "Then we go to it. You cleansed your blood once. Maybe the river demands the same again, for your brother's child." Kene nodded grimly. "Then we ride at once." He turned to the council. "Gather the people to higher ground. Do not wait for orders." The high priest shouted after him, "My king, the river takes what it's owed." Kene looked back over his shoulder. "Then let it face me directly." Rain slashed across the night sky as Kene, Aaliyah, and the young woman with her child rode toward the riverbank. The sound of rushing water grew louder until it drowned the thunder itself. Houses near the shore had already been swept away. People waded waist-deep through the current, carrying baskets and crying for help. Kene leapt from his horse and waded into the water. "Get everyone to safety," he shouted. Aaliyah followed, soaked to the bone, clutching the child tightly. "Kene, it's too strong." He turned, raising his arms toward the roaring sky. "If the river wants the blood of kings, it will face me, not the innocent." Lightning illuminated the water. For a brief moment, a massive shadow rose from the flood, a spirit formed of mist and current, eyes glowing blue. The villagers screamed. Kene stepped forward, his voice breaking through the chaos. "You took my brother. You took our peace. But you will not take this child." The spirit's voice rumbled like thunder. "The prophecy binds the blood of twins. One cannot rule while the other's line survives." Kene's heart pounded. "Then take me instead." Aaliyah gasped. "Kene, no." But he was already waist-deep in the water. "If my life ends the curse, then let it be so. I will not let a child pay for my family's sin." The water surged higher, swallowing his waist, his chest. The spirit's eyes flared, then suddenly dimmed. The child in Aaliyah's arms reached out a small hand toward the river and whispered something no one could understand. The wind stilled. The water stopped rising. Then the spirit bowed its head. "The river accepts the offering of love over blood. The curse is broken." The flood began to retreat, slowly but surely, leaving behind silence, tears, and awe. Kene collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. Aaliyah rushed to him, dropping beside him in the mud. "You did it," she whispered, sobbing into his shoulder. He smiled faintly, rain dripping from his face. "No, we did." The child toddled closer and touched Kene's cheek. "Uncle." Kene froze. Then, with trembling hands, he lifted the boy and whispered, "Yes, Uncle. And from this day you'll never know hunger or fear again." The storm finally passed, the clouds breaking to reveal a sky full of stars. The people of Udo knelt in the mud, whispering prayers of thanks. And as the dawn light began to glow over the horizon, the river shone like a blade cleaned of old blood, peaceful at last. The dawn after the flood was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled of wet clay and palm leaves, and mist curled low over the soaked earth. The once raging river now lay calm and glimmering, its surface smooth as polished glass. But the silence that settled over Udo carried a strange weight, something between relief and mourning. Kene stood by the riverbank, bare-chested and weary, his robe torn from the struggle with the flood. Aaliyah sat beside the rescued villagers, comforting mothers whose huts had been washed away. The child, the last heir of his late brother, slept in her arms wrapped in a dry wrapper. The high priest approached slowly, leaning on his staff. "Your Majesty," he said, "the river has accepted the offering. No life was taken, yet the curse is ended. The gods have shown mercy." Kene turned to him. "Mercy came not from the gods, father, but from choice. My brother's son showed compassion where our bloodline showed pride. That is what broke the curse." The priest bowed. "Then the boy carries both the guilt and the grace of this kingdom. What will you do with him?" Kene looked at the child, his eyes softening. "He will grow here, not as a shadow of royalty but as a son of the land. When he's old enough he'll choose his own path." The priest smiled faintly. "Then Udo will prosper. For a kingdom ruled by love fears no prophecy." By midday the villagers began rebuilding their homes. Men lifted fallen palm trunks. Women scrubbed mud from calabashes and sang low songs to chase away fear. In the palace courtyard, drums returned, a slow, steady rhythm that sounded less like celebration and more like thanksgiving. The king and queen returned on horseback. The people cheered, throwing flowers and palm fronds at their feet. Children ran ahead shouting, "Long live King Kene! Long live Queen Aaliyah!" At the palace gates, Aaliyah stopped and turned to look back at the horizon. "It's strange," she murmured, "how fast joy returns after pain." Kene nodded, helping her down from the horse. "Because joy is a stubborn thing. It grows even in mud." They walked together into the great hall, where the elders awaited them. The old king sat upright on his chair, his strength miraculously restored. When he saw them, tears shone in his eyes. "My son," he whispered, "the gods have tested you and found your heart worthy." Kene knelt. "Father, I have done nothing but try to right the wrongs of our blood." The old king rested a trembling hand on his shoulder. "That is what makes a ruler. Power is not given to be worn, it's given to be used for others." He turned to Aaliyah, smiling warmly. "And you, my daughter, have stood through storms beside him. You have made this throne human again." Aaliyah bowed deeply. "I only followed my heart, my king." The council clapped their staffs on the floor in agreement. "Let Udo rejoice," Chief Ngozi declared. "The prophecy is broken. The river sleeps. The throne stands." But Kene, though smiling, looked away. The floodwaters had taken many homes. The people would need months to rebuild. "The throne stands," he said quietly, "but Udo must stand with it. I will not celebrate until every family that lost a roof has won again." The old king chuckled softly. "Your mother would have said the same. You carry her fire." Weeks passed. The floodwaters receded, leaving rich new soil along the fields. The villagers began planting early, calling it the harvest of mercy. Every morning, Kene walked among them, no guards, no royal robe, just the same man who once climbed trees for palm wine. He helped dig trenches, carried baskets, and listened to the laughter of children rebuilding swings from vine rope. At night, he sat by the fires with Aaliyah and the boy, now named Obinna, the father's heart. Sometimes they told stories to the people. Aaliyah's voice carried through the village like music. "Once," she would say, "there was a man who wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he owned. So he gave up his crown to find love, and in doing so found both." The people would cheer, though many didn't realize they were hearing their own king's tale. One evening, as the stars bloomed above the horizon, Kene and Aaliyah sat beneath the same palm where they had first met. The moonlight painted their faces silver. Aaliyah smiled faintly. "Do you ever miss the days when you were just the palm wine tapper?" Kene chuckled. "Every day. When I climbed, I only worried about falling. Now I climb with a whole kingdom on my back." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then climb slowly." They sat quietly for a while. The night hummed with crickets and the distant sound of drums. "Do you think the gods will ever leave us alone?" she asked softly. Kene's gaze drifted to the river far in the distance. "The gods never leave anyone alone," he said. "But if we walk straight, they stop following and start walking beside us." A soft breeze rustled the palms, carrying the scent of fresh rain. Then, from the path behind them, small footsteps approached. It was Obinna holding a tiny clay flute. "Uncle Kene," he said, his little voice bright. "The priest says I can play for the king." Kene grinned. "Then play, young Prince of Mercy." The boy raised the flute and blew a tune, soft, innocent, full of new beginnings. The sound drifted up into the night sky, where even the stars seemed to listen. Aaliyah closed her eyes, smiling through tears. "That sound," she whispered, "is what peace must feel like." Kene nodded. "Yes. The sound of truth finally breathing." They sat together until the moon climbed high, its reflection rippling across the quiet river. But just as the music faded, an owl screeched from the forest, long, sharp, and unsettling. Aaliyah stiffened. "Did you hear that?" Kene frowned, looking toward the dark line of trees. "Yes. The same call my grandmother's messenger owl used to make." The wind shifted, bringing with it a strange whisper from the forest, soft, almost human. "Prophecy never dies, it changes shape." The boy's flute fell silent. The palm leaves trembled overhead. Kene rose slowly, staring into the darkness. "Stay here," he told Aaliyah quietly. "I need to see what that was." Aaliyah stood too, gripping his arm. "Don't go alone again." He hesitated, then nodded. "Then we go together." He took her hand, and with the child safe inside the hut, they stepped cautiously into the shadow of the forest where old secrets slept, and new ones waited to wake. The night was heavy with wind and secrets. Every step Kene and Aaliyah took toward the forest felt like walking into an old memory, one that didn't want to be remembered. The air was damp and smelled of moss and burnt incense, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath since the Queen Mother's fall. The moon hid behind the clouds, leaving only the dim glow of their lanterns to carve a path through the shadows. Somewhere ahead, the owl screeched again, long, shrill, echoing through the ancient trees. Aaliyah whispered, "It's coming from the old shrine." Kene nodded, tightening his grip on the lantern. "That shrine belonged to my grandmother. She used to come here every new moon to consult the spirits." They reached a clearing surrounded by tall irako trees. At its center stood a crumbling altar, the stone cracked and covered in vines. The wind hissed through the leaves, making them sound like whispering voices. Aaliyah shivered. "Let's go back, Kene. Whatever's here, it's not meant for the living." But Kene stepped forward, his jaw set. "The living suffer because of what the dead began. I won't run from it anymore." He knelt before the altar. "Grandmother," he said into the darkness, "if your spirit lingers, speak now. Tell me why your shadow still haunts this land." For a moment nothing happened. Then with a faint crackle the air shifted. The lantern flame flickered blue. A cold gust swept through the clearing and slowly, like mist taking shape, a figure began to appear above the altar. The Dowager Queen Mother. Her ghostly form glowed pale and silver, her eyes empty but glimmering faintly with sorrow. Aaliyah gasped and gripped Kene's arm. "She's real." Kene's throat tightened. "Grandmother." Her voice was a whisper layered with many others, echoing like water in a cavern. "You should not have come, my son." "You called me," Kene said, his tone calm but firm. "The prophecy you built this kingdom on nearly destroyed it. Why are you still here?" The ghost tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Because prophecy is not a thing that dies with those who believe it. It is a debt. And debts do not vanish, they change hands." Aaliyah's heart pounded. "What debt?" The curse was broken. The ghost turned toward her, the shadows rippling through her translucent gown. "You broke blood with mercy, girl. But mercy too must be balanced. You took the river's anger, now the river will take something back." Kene stepped between them, his voice rising. "You will not harm her." The ghost's tone softened. "I did not come to harm. I came to warn. The river spirits are restless, not from vengeance, but from hunger." A balance was made through sacrifice offered and refused. "They still await an offering, Kenechukwu." Kene frowned. "You mean, they want a life?" The ghost nodded slowly. "Not death, dedication. Someone of royal blood must become the river's keeper, bound to it forever so that peace endures." Silence fell. The trees seemed to hold their breath. Aaliyah whispered, "Bound? You mean, someone would have to stay there? Forever?" The ghost's face flickered sadly. "To live as guardian between worlds. Neither king nor man but voice of the water. That is the price of lasting peace." Kene stared at her for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. "Then let it be me." Aaliyah spun toward him, horrified. "Kene, no. You just rebuilt everything. The people need you. I need you." He took her hands, his voice low but steady. "Aaliyah, if I don't do this, the flood will return again and again. I cannot build a kingdom on borrowed peace." Tears filled her eyes. "We've lost enough already. There must be another way." The ghost's voice softened. "There is one other way, but it carries its own pain." Kene looked up sharply. "Tell me." The Queen Mother's spirit raised her hand. "If a bond of love stronger than blood willingly takes the place of the river's air, the balance may be kept. The gods only demand a heart that beats for another." Aaliyah's eyes widened. She understood immediately. "No," Kene said before she could speak. "Aaliyah, don't." She stepped forward, tears streaming. It's me they'll accept. My heart has already been joined to yours. The river knows love. It saw it when I ran into its flood with you. He shook his head violently. You're not giving your life for mine. I'm not, she whispered. I'm giving it for ours. The ghost spread her arms. Choose quickly. The moon wanes. Kene dropped to his knees, torn between duty and love. Aaliyah, please. We've finally found peace. Don't take it away from me. She cupped his face in her hands. You gave up your pride for love, Kene. Now let me give up my life for peace. That's what makes it real. The air thickened. The river nearby began to glow faintly blue, its surface rippling without wind. The ghost nodded. She is ready. Her heart is pure. Kene's eyes filled with tears. If the gods have hearts, they'll see this is too cruel. Aaliyah smiled through her tears. It's not cruelty, it's completion. She turned to the ghost. What must I do? Step into the river, the Queen Mother said gently. Speak his name and offer your vow. Aaliyah turned back to Kene. He grabbed her hand desperately. Please, Aaliyah, don't go. I can't rule a kingdom without my heart. She leaned close, their foreheads touching. Then rule it with mine inside you. Before he could stop her, she slipped from his grip and walked toward the glowing water. Each step seemed to make the air hum with energy. When she reached the edge, she looked back one last time. I'll never be far, she said softly. Every time it rains, you'll hear me. Every time the river flows, you'll feel me. Then she whispered, Kene. The moment her feet touched the water, light burst across the forest like dawn. The river rose, swirling around her in ribbons of blue. She closed her eyes and smiled as the water embraced her, and then slowly she vanished into the glow. The river calmed instantly. The wind died. The ghost of the Queen Mother bowed her head. Balance is restored. Kene fell to his knees, sobbing, clutching the earth where she had stood. No. Come back to me. Aaliyah. The ghost's voice trembled. Do not weep, my grandson. Love like hers does not die, it transforms. Every rain that falls on Udo will carry her blessing. She began to fade, her final words lingering in the air. Rule well, king of the river's heart. Weeks passed. The rains came gently now, never flooding, always warm. The people of Udo said the river had learned to smile again. Kene ruled wisely, his crown lightened by love. At night he walked alone to the riverbank. Sometimes when the moon was bright, the water shimmered, and he could hear a voice singing softly, a woman's voice, tender and eternal. He would close his eyes, smile faintly and whisper back, Aaliyah, my queen of the water, I still climb for you. And when he looked down, the river would ripple in answer as though smiling. The kingdom of Udo flourished for generations, and travelers would tell tales of a king whose queen became the spirit of the river, a love so strong it calmed storms. They called it, the Song of the River Bride. And thus, the story of the pretty city girl who fell in love with a poor palm wine tapper, and unknowingly gave her life for a kingdom, became legend. Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe true love can calm even the fiercest storms. Because sometimes, the greatest crown is the one worn by the heart.